Not similar. Okay, thank you, Ali. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick, Master Distiller at Bladnock. So, like Ali said, thank you very much for coming on. And hopefully, I've never done a peated full tasting online before, so this should be fun. And yeah, ask any questions. They can be related to the whiskies. They can relate to anything as we go through. We run these sort of tastings if you've ever been on one before, quite informal. Ask a question, give a thought, no problems. Just drop it in the chat, and I'll pause for thought after each dram, and I'm sure Ali will read out any fun stuff that we can get to. And also as we go through, I'm always keen to know what your tasting notes are. What are you getting? If you've ever been on one of these before with me, what I say is not gospel. It doesn't matter if you don't get what I get. It's more of a provocation for you guys to think about what you might be getting off everything. So yeah, ask any questions, drop it in the chat, and more than happy to answer as we go through, because we'll get tired of my voice after the first couple of minutes. But we're going to go in order of what I got in the box anyway, which is a Linter Reserve, cask 1, 2, and 3. Simple as that. Okay. So feel free to pour a Linter out right now, and I'll give a little bit of background as to the whole peated collection and how we got here, because I think it's a bit more of an interesting route than the non-peated collection, if I'm honest. So a little bit of background to what happened when I joined Bladnock, and the Bladnock stocks in general. The Bladnock stocks were an unpeated distillery, and when I joined, we had all of the 2009 distillate that was made was 100% peated. Don't ask me why that is. I didn't do it. But for an unpeated distillery, this was at the time a bit of a brain scratcher to go, okay, well, in my role, what am I going to do with that? So over the course of a couple of years, we had to, you know, look towards developing an outlet for that, product for that. And as we moved to, promoting our taste first approach to whiskey, it actually fitted in quite well with that ethos of we're trying to, make sure there's something for everybody at Bladnock. So having a peated collection, albeit a niche, small part of the portfolio, is actually quite an important part of the portfolio as well. And as a result, we still do a month of peat laydown. It's only a small portion of our total laydown, but we still want to make sure we've got stocks that are flexible, and peated distillate is actually a part of that as well. So we continue that now, and we turned what could have been a challenge into something great with a Linter. And when we made a Linter, it was actually popular. People really liked it. It was described as a peated whiskey for non-peated drinkers, and that's what most people describe it as when we get to it. And so that then kicked on to the rest of the peated collection becoming a thing, and that was released last year in October to align with our peated production. So that was a bit of background as to how we got there. I'll get into the products a little bit more detail as to why we ended up with the specific products as we go through, but a little bit of background as to what might become a challenge. You can turn anything into an opportunity, and that's what we've done with our peated collection. It's a great story. So with that, Alinta is the stable core peated variant that we started off with, and Alinta is really part of the twinned cask collection. It sits in that part of Bladnock because we use ex-bourbon and ex-PX sherry casks together, combining with that peated spirit is the makeup of this. And the rationale for it was we wanted to make peated, but not have it as the front part of the whiskey. We wanted it to complement the casks, and we wanted to still have the sweetness and the influence of maturation, but not overridden by any of the peat. And you'll see that through everything. The peat adds to everything; it doesn't override it, and that was the Bladnock way of making peat. So bourbon and PX cast together, and you get this almost kind of toasted marshmallow note I describe, with this campfire piece that comes from the peat. It's not Isla peat. It's not medicinal or germaline or iodine. It's very much sweet oak smoke maybe, a little bit of that campfire ember, as opposed to the Isla peat that you get, which can be a bit iodine or ashy. And our peat comes from Aberdeenshire, so it's mainland peat, and it comes from Aberdeenshire, and it's put into the malting process by our partner Simpsons in Berwick. Okay. And again, on the palate, lots of that kind of toffee apple and bonfire that come through. But it is a balance of those two. It's not smoke and that's all you can get. Those bourbons and American oak bourbons and those European oak PX casks really add a good thickness on the mouthfeel. You get that toffee apple that I spoke about, plus that bonfire, and it's this long, sweet, smoky. Smoky is probably a better word than peaty. I know it's called the Peated collection, but you'll notice on some of the adverts we always refer to it as smoky because I think that's a better way of describing this than peat. And also, a lot of when we go out to the big wide world with it, a lot of people don't know what the word peat means, and because why would they? They don't have peat bogs where in some parts of the world. So describing the experience rather than the ingredients was the approach to this. And I remember me and Ali had some good chats on should it be peaty, should it be smoky, and ultimately we want to describe the whiskey and the taste. So that's Alinta. That's how we landed on it, and it was an inspiration to, utilize some of the more at the time challenging stocks, but now they're very unique stocks, and we want to amplify them. So great start, and hopefully most people who aren't a peated drinker who drink this actually like it. And ironically, our owner David was across this week, and that was one of the things he said. He's become a peated fan as a result of that because he never got on with peat. So he loves the Linter, and it's a core ongoing part of the Twin Cask collection. It's probably the bridge between Twin Cask and Peated collection. So yeah, I'll pause. Hopefully that makes sense. But Ali?
I mean, I actually have a question myself on this. So when it comes to the distillation process, are there any key differences between using barley and peated barley, or is it the same? Is it cut at the same point? Is any challenges around peated barley that you don't have
So
otherwise?
it goes through the same process. Fundamentally, it goes through the same process. The main difference is obviously at the malting stage, but that's obviously a change of fuel. Because it's got high phenols during fermentation, you can lose a bit because it'll change with the pH, so you get a drop in efficiency, not a drop in character, you get a drop in efficiency at fermentation. Bladnoch's got it's got two intermediate vessels as I refer to them. So your low wines and faints tanks in between wash and spirit. We've got two lines. One's dedicated peat, one's dedicated unpeated. Now most distilleries only have one line. So when you put peat through, you have to run it on a bit further with unpeated to get the residual phenols coming off and making sure it's back to unpeated. We can very quickly go from peated to unpeated without affecting either spirit, basically. So it's a real flex that we've got with the distillery to very quickly flop. In terms of cut points, in general, it remains the same. Sometimes run peat slightly longer, depending on the phenol performance of the malt. If you've got a great performing, if they've done the peating process well, you can keep the cuts the same. If it's slightly lower in peat content at that we get with the inbound malt, you might run your second cut slightly longer because that's where a lot of the phenols do come off, but you can get a lot off earlier in the normal cut if you've got great peated malt.
Okay, and then
So
like when
technical
you're marrying
waving around
the casks together,
yeah.
is it any more challenging when you're dealing with a peated spirit, or no?
Really no. The challenge would be cask management. So what you have to do is once that cask's had peat in it, you have to ring fence it as a peated refill. Otherwise, you end up getting peat in casks that were going for vanilla, and you end up once they're peated, they're dedicated peat casks. So you just have to ring fence them and manage that stock properly.
Okay. No other questions coming through yet. So yeah, just anyone has just a little reminder, there's the chat in the side there. So
no issues, we'll crack on. And also capture your tasting notes if you're up for it. I know you've got your card and stuff, but great to see it live. So we've got a linter, and everyone liked it, and it was great. And do more. We can only do. We've only got. It will only ever be a niche part of the portfolio. That's one thing. We wouldn't ever become a peated distillery. It's not. It's not our. It's not our province, so to speak. But we do want to make sure that we've got somewhere for peated fans to go. So after a linter, wanted to develop that into a collection, and we'll talk about the single casks in a moment because there's a reason they're selected as they are. But I wanted to have something that sat above a linter, and instead of it being twinned cask, have a single cask variant that it was derived from, and do a limited release once a year that we showcased peat in a different cask type at a bit more scale. So not single cask, but a bit of scale. So we launched 2,000 bottles of Alinta Reserve each year, and every year we'll change the cask type to make sure that people are, exploring peat with different casks at scale. So that was the inspiration for Alinta Reserve. And within the stocks, we generally lay down in bourbon and PX, but we do lay down smaller amounts in peated casks, and we will reserve them out effectively for Alinta Reserve because once you've made it peaty, you can't flex it other than a peated product. So that's where Alinta Reserve comes from. We'll do a 2,000 bottle release every year, and it'll be a different cask variant. So again, I think that the labels were done for the next cask variant the last couple of weeks. So watch this space in October for Alinta Reserve number 2. But this one was derived from a combination of, pulled together from Amontillado sherry cask. So European oak, you're still getting that European oak feel to everything, but it's a slightly more acidic sherry that's been used. So it's degraded that wood, slightly different from Oloroso. So you get this smoky white chocolate nutty feel, and this nuttiness comes through from those Amontillado casks. Again, still smoky. We're not going to not say smoky throughout everything else. So it feels like repeating, but I'm not just going to invent words for the sake of it. It's smoky. Well, we'll call it smoky, but you get this sweet white chocolate, smoky white chocolate note come through, and nuttiness. So they're the overarching 3 descriptors that I gave to it, but specifically nutty on walnuts is what I got, and you got these almost like smoked dried apricots on the nose. It was this sweetness, fruitiness, but it was almost like you'd smoke some dried apricots. And on the palate, that again, the descriptor of smoky white chocolate starts to come through. Walnuts are still through in that terms of the nuttiness, and you get a hint of herbal pine cones. I got a little bit of pine cone come through. But you get this finish that is, for a peated whiskey, it's actually sweet, but it's quite a delicate smoke. Again, going back to the balance that we're after, not after smack in the face challenge of how tough can you be drinking this peatiness. It's very smoky warmth that comes through, as opposed to long lingering medicinal type notes. So sweet and delicate to finish with that smokiness of warmth rather than peat. So yeah, a great reserve that came through, and it's a great example of what Amontillado can do to a European cask with that white chocolate and nuttiness.
Yeah, I was going to say I really get the white chocolate coming through on it, and when I first had it, I thought I need to check what the ABV is on that because it did feel like it was punchier, but it's actually not. But I think it's that well, for me, it's just a bit more of an intense smokiness to it.
It is. It's more intense than the Linter.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's still balanced with it's less woodiness, but a lot of sweetness comes in. Yeah, yeah.
You've got a couple of tasting notes coming through from people in the group. Some toffee, candied hazelnuts, cinder toffee, condensed milk on the nose.
Yeah.
Slightly smoother on the palate.
Smoother.
Yeah. Oh, your favorite word?
No. To be fair, as long as you write smooth, I'm happy. Just means you guys like it. That's fine. You can write smooth all day.
Can I ask maybe a bit of a silly question? If we have lowland peat, and we compare it to, for example, Isla peat, would you be able to taste the difference in the two? Does the peat itself, obviously it's very smoky, it has like quite a strong flavor, but is there a big difference in between regions of what peat tastes like, or is it all just smoky and that's it?
No, and that's what I'm referring to as the difference between the medicinal iodine, germaline, ashtray, the classic descriptors of an Isla peat. That's how I get it. With a mainland peat or an Orkney style peat, which is very much more campfire, smoky, wood fires. It's that type of descriptor. And again, that's how I describe it. But there is a difference and I always get a difference in Isla peat and mainland peat. And Ali, you'll be able to back that up with your Bruichladdich times. Like it's very distinct on Isla, and I guess that's probably why there's a lot of distilleries on Isla because it is very distinct. But we obviously want it to be. I don't want to call it mainland peat, but we're not going after a mainland peat style. We're going after a Bladnoch peat style, which is this campfire but balancing off with the cask maturation. But yeah, Isla versus all other peat, you can tell the difference from me absolutely.
Do you find that it's easier to balance our peat, let's say, because it's not as medicinal, it's not maybe as jarring as, let's say, Isla one?
Mainland peat, yeah, I
Perhaps.
think mainland peat, you look at things like Highland Park, it's a similar approach there. It's more of a softer kind of experience, let's call it. But again, peat can hide quite a lot of things because it is quite powerful. So sometimes you can get away with a lot more when you're using peat. But if you're trying to balance it, that's a bit more of a challenge, whether it's Isla or Isla or mainland. And I've got, so it depends on the plant matter. Yeah, that's exactly right. It'll depend on what made it, and depend on the climate that all that matter was grown in. And Isla's, quite open to the Atlantic Ocean. Let's put it that way.
I've got a question for you, Nick.
Sure.
Is it 65 to 70 ppm? Is that right?
So inbound is 65, 70 ppm. So all our peat numbers come from the malt that we take in. So yeah, we specify high peat, which is 65 to 70 ppm, depending on how efficient they have been with it.
Is that an option we can choose when we're purchasing the barley? Could you go for something a bit lower?
Yep.
Does the distillation process reduce that, or will the bottled whiskey at the end process still be 65 ppm?
Yeah, it takes some out. So that 70, 65 doesn't equate to what's in the bottle. That's our starting point. And I'm actually, working with I was walking around the office with the sample of a potential innovation on this. So I'm working closely with Simpsons on that for the future years. But they've got a new peating plant, and some of the discussions were, when you get into the peating process, you can make really highly peated malt, kind of 200, 300, 400 ppm, and it's expensive to do. But the way I think of the stocks and how we build them is I'm after concentrates. So it might be great to get 250, 300 ppm malt, get it through the plant, but I've got a high concentrate of peat in the stocks, and I only need to use a little bit of it sometimes. So it was just a different way of maybe thinking about stocks. But yeah, 65, 70 at the minute, that'll be the standard. We could specify it lower, but that'll be lower in the final product because it isn't all flow through.
Thank you.
And then another quick question for me on the barley. You can tell we've not spoken to Nick too much about the peated collection, so we all have these wonderful questions for. But the barley itself, is buying peated barley more expensive than unpeated?
Yes. So it's normally, for example, call it £400 a ton for unpeated. You normally add £100 on per ton for the peating process because it's just a different fuel stuff. It's not gas dried, so you have to buy the peat. So it's just an additional material on their fault. But yeah, it's about £100 more as from the base price premium. Okay.
So question from Bob about what sort of ages are the Alinta and the Alinta Reserve?
So
Give away those.
What's that?
If you're going to give away those secrets or not?
Oh no, I think so. It's actually top dressed is a good way of putting them. So there's a range of ages that make up the base of it within those casks. But as I mentioned, the 2009 as that full whole year is peated. We use some of that in this as well. So all these should these all peated from Bladnoch should have some 2009 in it, if that makes sense. So it's top dressed with 2009. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, this is the super geeky question. Do you analyze the residual in bottle ppm and the subphenol levels for each bottling? From
No,
Simon.
we okay. Yes, we do. So we run certs of analysis on the bottle product. Okay, and that will cover all the high alks, all the high alks, congeners, and the wood extracts, but it will also include phenols. So for Vinaya, it will have a phenol ppm number on there, which will be 0.001 or something. But when we get them back for the peated products, obviously it'll come through at whatever number it might be. It does vary, which is interesting. It's not used to sign off the whiskey. So a lot of the times, and I can't remember I was talking about this. I was talking about it somewhere, and they were saying, you know, how much analytical stuff do you use? It was on a YouTube interview this week, and they said, do you use HPLC and gas chromatography and to give the science credit for this? And I said, well, we'd only use it in the event that something didn't work off the nose and palate, or there was a catastrophe somewhere. Provided that Alinta hits the same nose and taste profile of the previous ones, that's what the sign off will be. But when you actually look at what we will all perceive as exactly the same Alinta, when we run the analysis on it, it's always very different. So what would happen is if you ran the sign off based on the analyticals, every bottle would be different. It'd go the opposite way. So I only use the analyticals a lot of the time as a root cause as to how do we try and understand something when it doesn't marry up. That's kind of when we use them from, or for a customs or for a regulatory perspective. So we never use it to kind of sign anything off because that's always done. That's not just us, that's the industry. The industry signs off with nose and the industry really just signs off with nose. Very little tasting's done. The consumer is normally the first person to taste the product. When you work through, that's the only way to do it. So yes, we do it, but we don't promote it. We don't do it. Okay. Anything else, Sally?
Nope, nothing at the moment.
Right. So number one, if you want to pour number one out, and I'll give a little bit of background onto the single casks that are in the peated collection. And it was a way of opening up the 2009 stocks again. And once a year, we'll dip into the 2009 stocks and we will pick 3 peated single casks out of there. And that's how we will use the 2009 stocks going forward. So it is once a year, we'll dip into that unique year of peated distillate and we'll pick off 3 single cask in the same way we do the normal single cask, but they'll be peated, but they'll only ever be from 2009. So these 3 are 3 belters to start the whole thing off, and the next 3 will come out in October, along with the next Alinta reserve. So the first one is a rum cask. Again, straight away you'll notice it's higher ABV. Not coming through as dramatically, but it is all cask strength. Rum cask is obviously American oak, so it's always going to be confectionery, but you get this real sugary, floral campfire note coming off it again. You get sugar cane, and this floral, it is quite a floral, herby nose to it, which is coming from obviously our distillate, but that effect that sugary based rum has on the wood as well. Palate, you get that campfire marshmallow that I described in Alinta, but you get this real apple pie note to it as well. This baked apple pie comes through from that American oak rum cask. It's slightly it's slightly dry on the mouthfeel for finish, but that sweet smokiness comes through again. Again, it's this sweet campfire smokiness that you get through on that finish. But it's quite a juxtaposed finish to that mouthfeel, which is this dryness on the tongue, but you get this on the breath, you get this sweet smokiness coming through at the same time. It's quite a great finish to it, actually.
Yes, Sarah's saying sweet and buttery, and I got that as well when there was like there was a viscosity to it, and kind of
Sticky. Yeah.
yeah.
And again, it's great that you guys are doing that because I'm saying sugary apple pie, and it's just me provoking, and it's making everyone think of something similar. Yeah, buttery.
Yeah, I actually got raisins as well, but I could be way off with that one.
Oh, like no,
Maybe just because you said rum casks.
maybe because I said rum, maybe because I said sugar, maybe
Probably.
because I said sugar cane or apple pie. But
Mm.
again, that's what you're getting. So there's nothing wrong with it. If you think it tastes like raisins, then that's great.
Yeah.
There's only one that I've ever kind of gone, no, is when someone would taste like a vanilla and they would nose and say, "Oh, I can smell the peat in that." You've got to sort of, I mean, you can't not. But generally, yeah, whatever you are getting is correct because that's what you're getting, and that's the point.
So
Okay.
how did you choose that single cask #1 was going to be rum? Like, how did you choose the numbers?
So same as the original single casks, I'd already ring fenced all those casks in advance in year 1 when I joined. So I didn't pick them year on year. I had this group of that. They will be the 25 casks, and that's what happened. Same here. So we've got them for a number of years. And yeah, I wanted to demonstrate in year 1 a bit of breadth. So we've got a rum, a sherry, and a bourbon. And I wanted to make sure that they were intense and in flavor, but they weren't going to go too far. So things like the sherry, you could go if you let it go to the end of the program, it might be too much with all the peatiness and the smokiness and the European oak. But I generally just wanted to give a breadth of experience.
Mm.
You know, how can that smokiness be different between casks? You know, and that's always the inspiration of anything in Bladnock is just trying to show how it can be different just with casts and different makeups and stuff. So that's the inspiration. Why they were 1, 2, and 3 in that particular order?
No, no reason.
Probably just how they fell on the bench is kind of my probably just how I nosed them and wrote 1, 2, and 3. That's all. You know, again, you know me. If there's no magic, I'll not say there's any magic with it.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong. Have we aged any other spirit in rum casks?
Have we aged any other spirit? Yes, there
Or
is.
like unpeated, sorry.
Yes,
Unpeated.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah. We have got stocks maturing in rum casks,
okay. Yeah,
in Amontillado casks.
You-
Yeah, so when
you
we
must be
finish,
hiding that. I've not seen that anywhere.
what's that?
You must be hiding that. I've not seen that anywhere.
It's in the treasure chest
Yeah.
somewhere. Maybe if we have a Jamaican, you know, opportunity, maybe we'll pull a rum cask out for a Jamaican exclusive or something. So, but yeah, okay. Any more comments while I pour #2?
Just some more tasting notes of
Excellent.
buttery pastry, golden syrup, ginger cake.
Yeah, smoked ginger cake. Again, these are all descriptors that you could just add the word smoked to. You know, smoked pastry, smoked ginger cake. It's a great example of what it could be. And they're all a lot of times when you describe peat and aged whiskies, I end up coming out with what it tastes like and noses like. But when you write it down, doesn't exactly sound appealing. You know, like leathery or tobacco leaf or medicinal. They don't read well. But actually, smoked ginger cake is actually the great descriptors that can actually be appealing. Okay, #2. Again, 2009. And you'll also notice that they're not, this is 58.3, so it's not lost a lot of strength. So there's as it gets older, it loses strength. It does, but if you've got a good cask and you store it well and you protect it, it doesn't need to lose a lot. And it doesn't need to lose a lot, and you still end up with with a great great dram. So a lot heavier than number one in that Oloroso hogshead. So again, hogshead, smaller cask, it's gonna have a lot more impact on it. Bonfire, polished oak and jam. Again, it's a lot more intense. You'll see I tried to come up with different ways of describing the peat, but bonfire and the polished oak do go well as a descriptor for it. And on that nose, you get this polished oak, a little bit of nutmeg and dates. It's actually quite a strong date note, that sugariness that some people get. I describe it as dates. And then on that palate, wow, yeah, it's this bonfire smoke, and this plum jam, this sweetness, this real sugary stickiness. The viscosity is still there, but you get this almost like bonfire toffee smoke on a bonfire night. And then I've written on my tasting notes, bonfire Christmas cake. You know, I'm trying to pull these words together. Just like we said, smoked ginger cake, but bonfire Christmas cake is a great descriptor of that, and it probably gives a nod to the 14-year-old and what that I said was Christmas cake. But yeah, it is like a bonfire Christmas cake, like a bonfire version of the 14-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
It's a belter.
Interesting question as well from Iona. She's wondering about the flavor split between cask and the peat, as in like what influences the flavor of the whiskey the most. Is it the cask, or when it comes to peated whiskies specifically?
Yeah. So when it comes to peated whiskey specifically, well, we can't get away from the fact that all of this tastes like peat. So therefore, it must be at least 50% going towards the peat. So, and I think that sherry cask, and it depends on the cask and then the fill of the cask. So when we're looking at the two American oaks, it's obviously slightly more peat than the cask. So you're probably talking 60-40 in favor of the peat distillate. Whereas when we get to the sherry that we've just had, you're probably talking a little bit more 60-40, maybe the opposite direction. But again, that's quite a bonfire feel to it. So it really just depends on the cask and the oak type and how much that's gonna stand up to the peat. When you get to the Isla peat, that is very distinct. You're into the 70-30 in favor of it. You just can't. That's what it's made for. That's the distillery character, and it's kind of why you're drinking peated whiskey from Isla, is to have the peat. But we wanted to open it up and kind of bring it to the 60-40, 50-50 world. But it does operate different to nut and peated, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, for me on that one, it's like on the nose, I'm not getting as strong a smokiness or peatedness, but as soon as like that on the palate, it's quite explosive.
Yeah, 100%. And I do like that. I think Alinta does that as well, which is you don't notice too much peat, and we actually changed the labels on a lot of them to include this peat collection and the P that you see, because we didn't want people getting caught out by it, because it is quite a polarizing flavor. So when you nose it, you're right, Ali, you kind of go, "There's something there," but then it all unloads on you when you put it in the mouth. Yeah.
And Brian was saying for him, it's quite fruit forward
Mm-hmm.
rather than peated, but just with adding a few drops of water really kind of opens up the
Peated. I get you the fruitiness. You bet me it's cash strength as well, and everything going together at that straight. You can get it can be described as fruitiness, because you've still got the Bladnock cut points, and you got the fermentation. You got everything going in there, so you still have got that lowland herbal feel to it and that floral note to it. But yeah, adding a bit of water. I've not added water, and I'll not add water today, but a couple of drops of water would open all this right up in terms of probably dilute some of the peat on things like Alinta and Alinta Reserve. But things like the rum cask, a couple of drops of water would open up the sugariness a lot more, and that apple pie note that we got. Great stuff.
Fab. No other questions.
No,
this
okay.
time.
Move on to the final
Yeah.
one. And
Firing through them this evening.
which is great. Well, we'll open it up to a chat afterwards.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
That's good. I think number 3, I said I wanted to show the difference when I picked them, but the wanted a classic, and we do use bourbon in some of the single casks as well, and you'll see single cask bourbons within the unpeated range. So I wanted to have something in there from 2009. What was the peated variant of it as well? And actually, I don't know if anyone was on it or not. A peated 2009 won the first Loch Maybury as well. It was the first ever single cask peated bottling that we ever did. So I wanted to kind of bring that to the fore, which is why it's got some notes of it's sandalwood, and it's warm, and it's got I wrote smoky custard, which I still can't say. I can never say the word custard apparently, but smoky custard was a great descriptor on the nose, and you've got this smoky vanilla custard. On the palate, that peatiness comes through for me as almost a toasting descriptor. I wrote toasted vanilla pods and sandalwood. It's coming through quite woody, that herbal sandalwood feel to it. But on the finish, you've got this sweet, smoky warmth that just keeps on going. But smoky vanilla custard was my overriding descriptor of that. I think I got a few comments in the office when I wrote that down, but it was just that's how I described it. I think that's great. And again, it's 20 degrees outside, so maybe the rum and the bourbon are people's favorites. You know, they're a bit more sweet, a bit more refreshing. So it'd be interesting to see what everyone thinks.
Yeah, I've got another couple of comments like smoky marzipan,
Yep,
baked cheesecake.
big smoky cheesecake.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the Cafe Melville there. Get Claire working on smoky cheesecake.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't normally drink peated whiskey. I don't know how I make it, but peated for non-peated fans is sort of where this whole breadth of things goes. Because I guess there's a bluntness of, well, to be fair, I've got to be able to taste it and get on with it as well. So I'll make it according to my palate as a principle as well. Not to be selfish.
Another quick question come through. Is this first fill bourbon?
Yes. Everything at Blind Knock is 95% first fill. We put a refill cask in deliberately, but we would call it out as refill. So unless we say refill, the assumption is everything is first fill. So first fill bourbon, first fill sherry, or also first fill rum.
And like stating the obvious here, but what does that bring to the end of whiskey and product? Like, what's so good about the
first fill piece?
95% first fill? Yeah.
So casks don't. Well, every time you use a cask, you think of it as a reservoir of flavor. So it's only got a certain amount of flavor, and every time you use it, you take some flavor out. That's not linear. Every time you use it, you take about 2/3 of the flavor out. So even just going from first to second is quite a drop off. Second to third, when you're at a third fill, it's not even in the same league as a first fill, because every time you take 2/3 at least out of whatever reservoir of flavor you've got in there. So it's actually, that's where we get. I mean, the natural color is it's a sign that we put on. Yes, it's a sign of quality. It doesn't really, the color doesn't affect the flavor, but it's a sign of our 95% first fill casks. You can see it in the color. That's where it comes from, and that's why we call it out, really. So it adds all that intensity, and it's very expensive to do. Let's put it that way. So most distilleries would spend more on their malt than they do on their casks. Whereas we're the flip. We probably spend twice as much on casks as we do on malt. And that just shows you where we're basing the flavor coming from. And 95% first fill, I'm pretty strong on maintaining that as in my role, because it is expensive, but hoping when we get to things like this, everyone can go, that's why they spend it on that.
Yeah, I mean, that links into the next question that comes through. quite nicely, which is what is it that makes Bladnoch different from other lowland malts? So on that note, would you say, you know, the fact 95% first fill is very, very unique to us as a
From a cask, but yeah, from a
Yeah.
lowland perspective, yep. And I think 95% first fill cask is pretty. I think we were on the call earlier on. I think it was something like only 20 distilleries in the whole of Scotland even have a remotely close percentage of first fill than us. People are at kind of 20 and 30% first filled. You get some up there at 60s and 70s. 95% is pretty up there, especially at the scale that we do. I think we've got, again, I never get involved with the comparisons. I think we have to stand by this is how we make it. Others will make it how they make it, but we lead with flavor. So again, yeah, we've led with the 3-word smoky custard for the last one. Yes, we've then told you how we do it with the 2009 and the barrels and the cask strength and so on and so forth. But the most important thing is getting across what the flavors are, and that's from a lowland brand that we're building. And that for me, flavor first in those 95% casks, first fill casks. That's how we want to make whiskey, and that for me is how I would answer that question.